Cody, you hear that from Sean Payton? Does that excite you about Payton possibly being this team's next head coach?
Sean Payton didn't say anything that I wouldn't expect Sean Payton to say about all the other franchises he's interviewing in public, but he did kind of give a peek behind the curtain on some of the questions we have about the Houston Texans situation specifically. Cowherd, and he talked for a good long while about his potential openings. He talked about how important the ownership situation is and being aligned with them so that things aren't a surprise, so that you're all on the same page. And so we know that's going to be one of those questions that he's going to have, one of those meetings, that he's going to have with the Texans where he has to ask some questions, has to ask some hard questions. Why you guys had two coaches in 2 years? Why you guys had, this disarray, this dysfunction in your organization the past couple of years? And how the Texans answer that question is going to be one of the major determining factors, it seems, for Sean Payton. Because he said the two most important things are ownership and a quarterback. Well, the ownership's a big question mark, and how you get to a quarterback became a little bit more clear today, but there's still questions about the quarterback situation. So then you start thinking about, well, if ownership and quarterback's really important, start looking at all these other teams that maybe want to talk to Sean Payton. You're like, well, the Texans going to have to do one hell of a sell job here because there's some quarterback situations that are better than theirs currently. There's some ownership situations that are better than theirs currently. So that was the big one. And then he basically said Nick Caserio is not a problem. I mean, that's what I took from it. It's like, yeah, I know Nick Caserio. We've interacted a few times. Like, it's not like he's meeting somebody new. And Sean Payton knows if he's walking in the building, he's taking over. He's the guy. He's deciding everything, basically, for that organization.
And Caserio essentially implied he'd be okay with that at his press conference. So now you kind of connect the dots and you go, okay, maybe there's more of a chance of this happening than a lot of people originally thought.
So in order of what basically Payton said was super important to him, the Texans have a pretty decent argument to be near the top or at the top in some of those. He talked about how you get a quarterback / draft assets, because it's not the quarterback for the Texans, it's the draft assets and getting a quarterback. That was number 2 on his list behind ownership. The division stinks in Sean Payton's mind. You heard him talk about it there.
He had to massage that very carefully, but basically implied that the AFC South is bad, which he's not wrong.
And there's nobody that's going to stand in his way. He didn't seem concerned about Nick Caserio. So the Texans check some boxes for Sean Payton, but that interview process is going to be where they check the rest of those boxes.
I like the way you worded that answer, Cody. I really like the way you worded the start of that answer. I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional, but you said Sean Payton is interviewing the teams, and that's basically what's happening here. It's not the teams interviewing Sean Payton. It's Sean Payton interviewing these teams. So there are going to be multiple teams that want Sean Payton to be their next head coach. As of this moment, there are 5 teams with vacancies, and I don't know if all 5 of them would want Sean Payton. I don't know if all 5 of them have Sean Payton at the top of their list, but there are going to be multiple teams who want to hire Sean Payton when it's all said and done. This is Sean Payton doing the interviews. This is him trying to figure out which situation is best for him. With all of the coordinator candidates out there, it's the other way around. But when you're talking about Sean Payton or maybe a guy like Jim Harbaugh, guys who have already been coaches, successful coaches in this league, they get their pick of the litter. So, yeah, I like hearing Sean Payton talk about some of the positives that the Texans have. But like you said, Cody, he would talk glowingly about some of the other situations as well. You can make an argument in favor of the Texans compared to the other 4 teams. You could also make arguments in favor of the other 4 teams in comparison to the Texans. So I like that he's interested. It seems like he's going to take the interview. Those are all positive signs, but I still don't take too much from that. I'm not sure if the Texans, with what they have right now, are at the tippity top of Sean Payton's list for where he ultimately wants to go.
Let's say he does want to coach the Texans. Well, there needs to be some sort of trade compensation agreed upon between the Texans and the Saints, because Sean Payton is still a Saints employee. This was Sean Payton revealing what the compensation could look like for the Saints if he's traded.
I think each team would be a little different. Mickey Loomis and I have talked already about it. I think ultimately the compensation for the Saints would be a mid or later first-round pick.
Interesting. Well, the Texans, as we know, have the 12th overall pick in the first round. We're not going to include the second overall pick, which is their own, but they own the Browns pick, which is number 12. And then they also have a very, very high second-round pick. It's 34th overall, but it'd be the 33rd player that's selected, because there's only 31 players being selected in the first round, because Miami lost their first-round pick due to the tampering charges, ironically enough, involving Sean Payton a year ago. So if it takes the 12th pick, I've been on the record, I would do it. But let's say it doesn't take that. Let's say it takes only that high second-round pick. I feel like then, what's the downside in bringing in Sean Payton, especially when the plan's going to be take a quarterback, and C.J. Stroud did declare today, so you're guaranteed at least Stroud or Young, no matter what. Why wouldn't you, if you're the Texans, make it work with a guy like Sean Payton?
That's the big million-dollar question. He talked about there's different requirements for different teams. So if it is indeed just the 34th overall pick, that's what we're calling it right now, the 33rd player in the draft. If it is indeed just the 34th overall pick, then the Sean Payton conversation gets a lot more interesting. I don't want Sean Payton if it costs the 12th overall pick in this year's draft. I really don't want to have a conversation about a future first-round pick either. So if it is indeed the 34th overall pick, the conversation becomes a bit more real for me, and I'm able to kind of find myself going down that path a little bit more. If it's coming down to draft pick compensation being any sort of factor in Sean Payton's decision, because, again, Sean Payton's ultimately going to say, I want to coach for this team, and then it's up to that team and the Saints to figure things out. And once Payton says, I want to coach, let's just use the Broncos, for example. I want to coach the Broncos. If he says that, then, okay, the conversation between the Saints and the Broncos gets very interesting. Now, the Broncos have a first-round pick. It's the bottom part of the first-round pick, and they believe it's 29th overall right now. They have it via a trade. And so with that, I wonder if maybe Sean Payton, then sort of representing the team he's headed to, would then try to play a little bit more hardball with the Saints. If I'm Sean Payton, I don't want to trade the 12th pick for me. I want to draft the 12th pick and coach him. Mm-hmm. So, like, and for Arizona, okay, they got the third pick. That's not the third pick they're trading for Sean Payton, so it's the 35th pick now, or the 36th, or the 67th pick, or the 35th and the 67th pick. Like, he gave a very wide range there. And especially adding in, it's different for different teams. Does that mean the Panthers are more expensive if they want Sean Payton because they're in the division?
I don't think he gave a very wide range there. I don't know if we should or even could put any stock into what Sean Payton said there, but he said mid to late first-round pick. There are only two teams with vacancies that have a mid or late first-round pick. It's the Texans, who have 12, and some people might argue 12 isn't even mid, but it's probably right around there. And then the Broncos, who have the Niners pick, and that could be – it's going to be somewhere late. It could end up being 31/32, the last pick in the first round. If they ultimately win the Super Bowl, obviously, if they lose earlier than that, it'll be before that. But Indy's picking number 4. That's not mid to late first. Carolina's picking 8. I don't think that's mid to late first. Arizona, as you mentioned, is picking 3. That's not mid to late first. So I don't know if we should put any stock into that, but there are only 2 teams out of the 5 right now that have mid to late first-round picks to even offer Sean Payton and the Saints.
Now, it's worth noting in a longer exposition about the compensation and the conversations that he's had with Mickey Loomis, he did casually throw in there the words future first-round pick. So I think that's where Arizona maybe pops up. That's where Indianapolis pops up. Maybe that's where the Texans pop up. Maybe they don't want to give up 12 this year, but maybe it's the Browns pick next year.
I like that because then you give Sean Payton more of an opportunity to identify someone that can help you this year and really kick off this rebuild.
It's worth noting that the Saints know exactly what every team's willing to give up for Sean Payton. That was the prerequisite to interview Sean Payton. You had to explain what you were willing to give up from compensation. So the Saints know. The Saints have an idea of exactly what they're going to get if the Houston Texans are the next destination for Sean Payton or the Carolina Panthers. So I almost wonder, too, if Sean Payton, because he's close with Mickey Loomis, he knows what these teams are offering. And now, obviously, when he sits down and has a meeting with them, hey, what do you guys have to trade to get me? And the Panthers are like, well, we got to trade 2 future firsts. Well, I don't want to do that. No, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do that. No, thank you. Hey, Texans, what do you got to trade to get me? Well, it's next year's Browns pick. Oh, okay. Well, they're going to be decent with Deshaun. It'd be like a middle of the first round pick. Let's do it.
It's going to be roughly around the same for every team, though. Like you know what I mean? Like maybe with the exception being Carolina because it's inter-division. Maybe the Panthers' asking price is a lot more if you're the Saints because you're trading them to a team in your own division. But within reason, I think it's going to be around the same. That's why he gave you that range of like mid to late first round pick because the compensation is going to be the compensation pretty much for every team, maybe minus Carolina.
Saints, you get Brandon Cooks, and that's it. You're going to like it.